Welcome back. Today we're going to be looking at an article that was tweeted out, or a picture of it, by Blair White. It got my attention because somehow fat was being lumped in with disabled and LGBTQ, and I found that to be rather interesting. Now, just before we get into the article, because it is fascinating, I want to take the opportunity to tell you that I have a page on minds.com. The reason I'm doing this is because I recently uploaded a full video there, and that full video was something I got a copyright claim on this channel with. The copyright claim itself is bogus, as the video quite clearly falls under fair use, but Teen Vogue are being utter cunts about it, so I've decided to put it on every single platform I use, including my Facebook channel page. By all means, like it if you want, I just don't care enough. I am of course disputing this and going down the proper routes. The video was actually created by Anna May Renee, and I would very much appreciate it if you go to her channel and subscribe, as she is very funny. Now let's get started. 5 ways schools can support fat, disabled, LGBTQ students. I love how LGBTQ and disabled are being linked with fat as if fat itself is some kind of minority in need of protection. I'm currently in high school, and I've been fat since I was 8 years old. I know it's quite early for me to cut into the article again, but it does say a lot about the obesity issues in your country, and also how bad some people are as parents. Unless you have a medical condition, there is no excuse for being fat. Fat is not healthy. We want healthy children. Well, most of society does anyway. I also have multiple disabilities and identify as both queer and transgender. Like all students, I live at the intersection of multiple identities. When you say you are somebody who has multiple disabilities, and you add to that with being transgender and queer, I feel like you're listing your identities there and then, as if the more you have, the more oppressed you are, and more of an authority to speak on such subjects. Now, as for the second sentence, that is not entirely true for all students. I personally didn't have to for 1 second question who I was. I knew who I was. I knew what I was. I was a huge cunt, and extremely intelligent, and very modest. This International Day of Persons with Disabilities, I'm sharing ways that schools can support all students, especially those who are fat, disabled, and LGBTQ, whose needs are often ignored. I don't like the fact that you've taken the International Day for Persons with Disabilities and added fat and LGBTQ as an excuse to air your personal grievances about how people are treated differently when they all seem to fall under the bracket of things that you don't like, or that apply to you because you are very, very oppressed. And marginalized, of course. 1. Reeducate students about what it means to be fat. I get the distinct impression I'm going to end up with a migraine at the end of this. Am I right to assume already that you think biology as a science is a social construct, or as much a myth as the Loch Ness Monster? Many people who are overweight have underlying medical issues and mental illnesses that cause them to be overweight. People think we are overweight because we ate wrong or didn't take care of ourselves properly, and they ignore these underlying issues. To the first part, I say citation needed. I'm not saying that there aren't other issues like medical issues that cause people to be unable to lose weight. However, you should provide evidence to substantiate your assertion. Now, as far as the second part of your little statement there goes, the reason people don't think about the underlying issues surrounding obesity is because one of the most common ways people become obese is by eating too much. It is the most common, and therefore people apply Occam's razor to this. It is wrong to, but then it brings up the issue of, does that person care enough about why you're so fat? Not you, the individual. I'm not now saying you're so fat. I mean, generally. Oh, I'm digging a hole. I should really stop and move on. I have polycystic ovary syndrome, which is known to cause weight gain. Other medical issues like ovarian cancers, thyroid issues, and Cushing syndrome can also cause people to gain weight. I also suffer from an eating disorder called EDNOS. This eating disorder means that I sometimes completely refuse to eat and other times eat compulsively. Since I'm also hypoglycemic and cannot have my blood sugar low, my refusal to eat can actually make me gain weight. Taking your PCOS and attaching it to ovarian cancer cancer, Cushing's syndrome, and thyroid issues seems a bit redundant, really. Yes, they all cause weight gain problems, but they don't apply to you and are very unlikely to affect anyone under the age of 20. I'm not now saying people under the age of 20 don't get it. Some do, but it is unlikely. And also, if you go to the NHS website, there are ways of treating PCOS. Of course, there's no cure. Of course not. But you can treat the symptoms. For example, eating healthy and reducing your weight does and can help reduce the symptoms. And there are, in fact, some medications that help too. I just feel like you're adding these particular syndromes and conditions to your own to try and inflating your own self-importance with your own problems and trying to balance them with others, if that makes sense. But in school, we are simply taught that diet and exercise will keep you from being fat, and that being fat is inherently bad and unhealthy. That is because for the majority of people, this works, and it is proven to be true. Also, being fat is unhealthy. This means that being a fat person in health class feels like a constant attack during the entire nutrition unit. We need to re-educate people about what being fat means and remind folks about the underlying medical issues that are related to weight gain. You are so keen to ask others to educate a wider audience about all these conditions that lead to weight gain, drawing attention to those that are bigger. Why not simply take the simpler solution to make yourself feel more comfortable and simply tell the class you are in, the unit you are studying, that you have a condition that you can't deal with. That way, rather than feeling uncomfortable because others may or may not be judging you, you can get the support you need from those around you who may possess an ounce of empathy in your direction. Instead, you're trying to shift the blame and shift all the focus back on yourself anyway by making yourself out to be a victim. You could treat your problems, I promise you can, but you compound them by adding to them. 2. Intervene in name-calling and bullying of all students, including fat and disabled students. I'm not big on bullying, but I'm also not big on censoring people's right to express themselves. There are consequences, and schools do not permit bullying. So if bullying happens, for whatever reason, because people see subtle differences, although in your case not so subtle, but a subtle difference, and they pounce on it because they think social superiority is obtained through making someone else feel smaller. Yeah, no, it doesn't work for me. Now to my viewers, if you were bullied, I would love to know how you dealt with it. Please tell me in the comments, because I was bullied. I was bullied because I was small, up until around the age of 15. But the bullying stopped when I was 11, because I refused to tolerate the teacher's inaction any longer. Take a wild guess what I did, but tell me how you handled bullies if you were bullied, because I would love to know how you dealt with them. According to middle and high school students surveyed in GLSEN research, the most common reason students are bullied at school is their body size and or appearance. So we go to the GLSEN website and we scroll past the teachers lack training on LGBTQ issues. We scroll past the compared to their non-LGBTQ peers, LGBTQ students are 2 times as likely to have missed school in the past month due to feeling unsafe or uncomfortable. And then we find top 5 reasons students are bullied at school. 1. Appearance, body size. 2. Sexual orientation. 3. Race, ethnicity. 4. Academic ability. And 5. Gender expression. According to students' reports of most common reasons students are bullied, called names, or harassed at their school. Source from Teasing to Torment, School Climate Revisited, GLSEN 2015. Now if we go to the summary version of the report, because the original is 148 pages long and this is only 13 pages long, we scroll down to bullying and harassment. Students named the most common reasons other students are bullied, called names, or harassed as their body size, appearance at 36.2%, actual perceived sexual orientation at 19.2%, race, ethnicity at 10.4%, academic ability at 10.1%, and how masculine or feminine they are at 9.2%. Now bear in mind this report is conducted over a number of people of 1,367 US secondary school, middle or high school grade students, aged 13 to 18, and 1,015 US secondary school teachers. While I have no doubt they did their very best to get a truly reflective, unbiased report, I can't help but feel that regardless of how they approach this, the US is far too big to get any decent reflection on how anyone perceives any other type of person or group or ethnicity or sexuality. I'm just not convinced. But that's my opinion based on the fact that you have a population of over 300 million, but nothing else really. Anyway, carry on, me. Carry on reading. As a fat person, I have had people tell me they had a problem with my body. Language that harms fat people is commonplace in society and especially at school. I better watch my diet. I don't want to get fat before summer. You're so pretty if you just lose a little weight. Your disease symptom would be better if you just lost some weight. The fat, insert censored insult of your choice. You're not fat, you're beautiful. Imagine being in a high school and hearing all of that harmful language. I would love to know why people were calling you fat, or why they had a problem with you being fat. I'm just curious. Also, two little things. One, does it not sound to me like all those comments you read out, or I read out, that you wrote down, was said by your parent? It sounds like something a parent would say. And two, when did we get to the point where sticks and stones may break your bones but words will never hurt you lost all meaning, and instead it became a case of, you said something mean, all of society needs re-educating to understand me. Luckily, educators and fellow students can intervene whenever they hear this type of name-calling and harassment and make it clear that it's not okay. Now I have to ask, if they already do this to tackle the problem that isn't as much of a problem as you make it out to be based on the report that I've linked below and read a part of, why do you have to make such an issue of it and indicate it as some kind of point that needs addressing more and more and more? 3. Make sure your GSA is truly inclusive. As a fat and disabled person who is also both queer and trans, I seek support from my GSA. Thing is, fat people are often disregarded in any space and are seen as less professional, less whole, and less respectable. But your GSA, where LGBTQ students often seek support, and truly all spaces in your school, should be welcoming of all identities, different abilities, and all body types. As that particular point was quite short, I thought I'd allow myself to read the whole thing. For those that don't know, GSA stands for General Services Administration, and as far as I'm concerned, being fat is not a form of minority or oppressed group. So no, you're treated as a normal person that is unhealthy, and if you don't like being told you're unhealthy because you may not have a medical condition that keeps you from losing weight, or you have a medical condition but you're not willing to put in the effort to try and reduce the symptoms that you can do to reduce the symptoms and therefore make your life a bit easier, then you shouldn't expect nor demand respect nor sympathy from anyone. I do believe all services should be inclusive, but I don't believe fat is a group that should be treated as if it's on par with trans people. 4. Teach students to love themselves, their bodies, and one another. It's easy to find articles on childhood obesity, nutrition, and fitness regimes for fat children, often as young as 8 or 9 years old. There is always some article on fat kids getting bullied and how to help them, but rarely is there an article that teaches young people to love themselves and not to harass their peers. What has often fascinated me is that there is some kind of magical cut-off point between the epidemic of childhood obesity in the West, certainly in the United Kingdom, and body positivity in adulthood. Somehow it happens in the teenage years, and I don't get it. To me, if you're obese as a child, it is unacceptable, unhealthy, and makes you far too susceptible to conditions, illnesses early on in life. You don't deserve that. We're an aging population and should live as long and healthy as possible. And if we can, diminish symptoms of anything that keeps us from being as healthy as we can be. I do like the idea of loving yourself. I think you should learn to accept you for who you are, which means if anyone else judges you, you ignore them. They're not going to be in your life forever. You are, though, unless you lose your mind, I don't know, get hit on the back of the head with a shovel and end up joining Scientology, I don't know, which we could all benefit from. Even if unintentionally, educators sometimes invite harassment of fat students in their lessons. For example, when educators teach about measurements and conversion formulas, students sometimes will weigh themselves on a scale and shout out the number. But it's easy to make an alternative that avoids the potential for harassment and the anxiety felt by students whose bodies feel on display, and better yet, encourages students to treat their peers with respect. There is nothing wrong with some light-hearted competition with students. They may not be at the point where they understand that their body is going to be slightly unique to them and not be the same as others, so when they see measurements they may not understand it. It is not a societal norm, it is simply a lack of knowledge. You feeling anxiety of getting on the scales isn't so much anxiety because other people will hear a very large number, but because you know that number is not right, and they know it too. So if they know and you know that that number that you weigh is wrong and something can be done to improve it, surely then, as a community, you come together and help each other, in this case, help you, instead of re-educating them into accepting fat as the norm. 5. Include positive depictions of fat, disabled, and LGBTQ people in the classroom. While I haven't agreed with you, the individual, much over the course of this article that you wrote, I do agree with this. That statement, I can agree with that. I think it could encourage and help others who are very confused reach out to others for help, to understand themselves, and that's a good thing. I can get on board with that. I'm a non-binary transgender person, which means that I don't identify as either male or female. Wait, earlier you said you were trans and queer, along with fat and disabled. Now you're trans non-binary. You never mentioned non-binary earlier, but now feel the need to point it out? Because you're not being represented. Huh, how unusual. Almost as if you had to add the label because you exhausted previous problems that aren't really problems. The moment you said trans non-binary, it was quite clear you were just a wannabe victim, and not someone who is serious on trying to improve relations in schools between students that are different, which is a lot of students. Congratulations, you lost the argument. Although I do agree with the statement of the last one, I don't agree with the idea of trans non-binary, or trans Tumblr. Let's go with that. Thank you all for listening.